For 5 long years, Nola had prayed, cried, and hoped to have a baby. Every month, she waited for a sign, but it never came. Still, she kept her faith strong and believed that one day she would hold her own child. Then, one sunny Saturday, something strange happened. Nola walked into her house and found it full of people, family, friends, neighbors. Balloons floated in the air, a big cake stood on the table, and everyone clapped and shouted, "Congratulations!" Confused, Nola looked around. Her husband Enzo came forward with a huge smile, dancing and shouting, "We're having a baby!" Nola froze. Her heart beat fast. She hadn't taken any test. She didn't feel different. She hadn't missed anything. So how was this possible? Enzo hugged her tight and whispered, "I just knew. I felt it in my spirit." Cameras flashed. People cheered. But Nola's smile was weak. Her hands were cold. Something didn't feel right. She tried to laugh with the crowd, but her mind was racing. What if this was all a mistake? What if this wasn't about her at all? She looked at Enzo again, still dancing happily with guests. He looked so proud. But inside, Nola was confused, scared, and lost. The party was loud, but inside her, there was only silence. She kept asking herself, why would he do this without telling me? How could he be so sure? That happy moment felt like a dream, but not the good kind. Nola felt like a stranger at her own celebration, and deep down, a quiet voice told her something is wrong, very wrong. A few months before everything exploded, Nola had opened her home to her younger sister Sina. Sina had just gone through a messy breakup, and Nola, being the loving big sister she was, wanted to help her heal. She welcomed Sina with open arms, offering her the guest room, comforting her with words, and assuring her that everything would be okay. Enzo, Nola's husband, wasn't thrilled about the idea. He didn't say much, but there was a certain unease in his eyes whenever Sina was around. Nola didn't think much of it. After all, she was family, and family was important. She was sure Enzo would get used to it, so she brushed off his subtle discomfort. At first, things seemed fine. Sina was quiet, spending most of her time in her room, reflecting on her failed relationship. Nola tried to cheer her up, making sure she felt at home. But slowly, things started to change. Sina began to borrow Nola's clothes without asking. Nola didn't mind at first, thinking it was just her way of finding comfort. But then, she noticed something strange. Sina was starting to wear some of the dresses that Nola loved, the ones Enzo used to compliment her on. It seemed innocent enough, so Nola didn't pay it much attention. After all, it was just clothes, right? But as time passed, Enzo started acting differently around Sina. He'd give her compliments that Nola had always been used to hearing. He'd tell her how beautiful she looked, how stunning she was in that dress. It was all things Enzo used to say to Nola. It made Nola feel uncomfortable, but she told herself, maybe I'm just being paranoid. She's family after all. Still, there was a growing tension between them. Nola would catch Enzo staring at Sina more than usual. Sometimes, when Nola wasn't around, Sina would laugh a little too loudly at Enzo's jokes, or he would smile in a way that made Nola feel like an outsider. She tried to push the thoughts away, telling herself that it was just her imagination. But deep down, she knew something wasn't quite right. One evening, Nola walked into the living room to find Enzo and Sina sitting close together, their heads bent toward each other, laughing over some private joke. Enzo looked at Sina with that same look, the one he used to give Nola when they first met. Nola felt her stomach twist, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she excused herself quietly and went into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. She didn't want to make a scene, especially not over something that could be nothing, but it felt like something more. Sina's presence in their home, which had once been comforting, now felt like a shadow. Nola tried to keep the peace, telling herself that she was just being oversensitive. She loved her sister after all, and didn't want to feel jealous or insecure. But the whispers in her mind grew louder every day. The laughter, the shared glances, the way Enzo seemed to be paying more attention to Sina than to her. It was starting to break her heart. Even though Nola told herself it was just family being close, the cracks were starting to show. Sina, who had come to heal, was quietly starting to break Nola's trust, inch by inch. Nola couldn't explain it, but she knew something wasn't right. Every little action, every smile from Enzo, and every time Sina borrowed her clothes, made Nola question what was really happening. And deep down, she had a growing fear that maybe, just maybe, her sister wasn't there to heal at all. She was there to destroy everything Nola had built. But Nola pushed the thoughts aside, convincing herself that family was more important than anything, even her own doubt. But as shadows began to dance in the corners of her mind, Nola was starting to wonder just how long she could ignore what was happening right under her nose. A few days after the baby celebration, Nola was still in a daze. She was trying to convince herself that the surprise party was just a misunderstanding, a mix-up in Enzo's excitement. But in her heart, something didn't feel right. One afternoon, while she was cleaning the bathroom, she noticed something strange. Tucked behind the cleaning supplies, half hidden and out of sight, was a box from a pregnancy test kit. Nola's heart skipped a beat. She quickly picked it up, her hands trembling slightly. The box was open, and inside was a used test. Confused, Nola stared at the test. She checked the box again, trying to steady her breath. The test was clearly positive, but the box wasn't hers. Nola had never taken a pregnancy test in the last week, and certainly not one that was hidden in the bathroom like that. The panic started to creep in as she scanned the rest of the box. She glanced over the label, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Her mind raced. But what really made her stomach turn was when she checked her period tracker on her phone. She'd been tracking her cycles carefully for months, hoping for the day she'd finally get pregnant. As she looked at the dates on the app, it hit her. The test didn't match her cycle. It was impossible. There was no way she could have missed it. The last time she had checked, her period was due 2 weeks ago, and she had never felt the signs of pregnancy. Something was terribly wrong. Nola's hands shook as she set the test box down on the counter. Her mind was spinning with questions. Why would Enzo hide this from her? Why wasn't he being honest? Her chest tightened as the realization began to settle in. Enzo had celebrated the baby news, but it wasn't her baby. The truth felt like a slap in the face. She thought back to the party, the way Enzo had been so sure about the pregnancy, the way everyone had cheered, but all of it now seemed like a lie she was too blind to see until now. Nola sat down on the edge of the bathtub, her mind racing, her heart heavy. She thought of Sina. She thought of all the times she had tried to ignore the small signs that something wasn't right. Sina's strange closeness with Enzo, the way they laughed together, the way Enzo's attention seemed to shift away from her. But now, it was all making sense. The baby Enzo had celebrated wasn't hers, it was her sister's. Tears filled her eyes as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. She felt betrayed in a way that words couldn't describe. How could they do this to her? How could Enzo, the man she had loved and trusted, hide this from her? And how could Sina, her own sister, do something so cruel? She had welcomed Sina into her home, and this was the thanks she got. Nola felt a surge of anger and heartbreak. Everything she thought she knew about her life, about her marriage, was crumbling before her eyes. She stared at the test, the proof of their betrayal, and the truth she had been too afraid to face. But now, there was no denying it. Something wasn't right, and the pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to come together. Nola had been living in a lie, and now the truth was staring her right in the face. Nola couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, so she decided to dig deeper. She had to know the truth, even if it hurt. As she went through the trash, trying to make sense of the pregnancy test, she saw something else that made her stomach drop. At the very bottom, buried under some old papers, was a receipt. It was folded neatly, but something about it caught her attention. She reached in, her fingers trembling, and pulled it out. The receipt was from Zia Women's Clinic. Nola's heart skipped a beat. The name on the receipt made her breath catch in her throat. Sina Adisa, her sister. Sina had been to the clinic 2 weeks ago. Nola's mind was racing, and her hands started to shake as she held the paper in her hand. How could Sina have gone to this clinic without telling her? Nola stared at the date, and the shock hit her like a punch in the gut. 2 weeks ago. That was the same time the pregnancy test was taken. She had to hold the receipt up to her face, blink hard, and make sure she wasn't imagining things. But there it was, in black and white, Sina's name. The realization slowly began to sink in. The baby Enzo had been celebrating. It wasn't hers. It wasn't even a test for her. It was Sina's. Nola's mind spun, trying to make sense of everything. Why would Sina go to the clinic without saying anything? Why had Enzo lied to her? Why hadn't anyone told her the truth? Nola felt like her whole world was falling apart. Everything she had believed in, everything she had trusted, had been built on lies. The receipt was a slap in the face. It was the proof Nola had been searching for, but it only raised more questions. How long had this been going on? Was this the reason Enzo had been so distant lately? Nola thought back to all the times she had seen Enzo and Sena acting too familiar with each other, how they would exchange little looks, how they would whisper and laugh when she wasn't around. It was all starting to make sense now, but the pain of it was almost too much to bear. She felt her knees weaken, and she sank down to the floor, still clutching the receipt. The tears came, not in a flood, but in a steady stream, as the shock of it all finally hit her. Her sister, her own sister. Sena had betrayed her, and Enzo, her husband, the man she had loved, had lied to her for weeks. The baby wasn't even hers, and the proof was right in front of her. Nola's head was spinning, and her heart felt like it was breaking into a million pieces. She could feel the weight of the receipt in her hands, and with every breath it felt heavier. She knew she had to confront them both, but the pain of it was almost unbearable. How had it come to this? How had everything she thought she knew about her marriage and her family turned into a lie? Nola didn't know what to do next. She didn't know how to face Enzo or Sena. She didn't know how to pick up the pieces of her shattered heart. But one thing was clear. Everything had changed. The life she had built, the trust she had placed in the people she loved, was all a lie. And now, Nola had to figure out how to survive the fallout. Nola's heart was heavy with the truth, but she didn't know what to do with it just yet. She couldn't confront Enzo and Sena. Not yet. Instead, she decided to play the part of the trusting wife, pretending she knew nothing, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, she was watching them closely, every moment, every interaction, trying to piece together the truth she already knew. She began noticing the little things, the way Sena and Enzo would exchange glances when they thought no one was looking. It was subtle, but to Nola, it was like a loud alarm ringing in her ears. Every time their eyes met, it was like they were speaking a secret language, one Nola wasn't part of. The looks were innocent to anyone else, but to Nola, they felt like knives being driven deeper into her heart. At night, she couldn't sleep. She heard them whispering in the kitchen, their voices low but urgent. Sena's laugh, a sound she used to find comforting, now made her skin crawl. Enzo's voice, once so loving and reassuring, now sounded foreign to her. She could hear them talking about things that didn't add up, little details she had never heard before. The way Enzo tried to explain things away, his words filled with lies. He told her he had long meetings at work, late nights where he was always too busy to come home early. But Nola knew better now. Those meetings were just excuses. He was lying to her. The pain of not confronting them, of holding all the hurt inside, was overwhelming. But Nola was smarter than that. She knew she couldn't just walk up to them and accuse them. She needed evidence. She needed to know the full extent of their betrayal. And so, she started to track everything. She kept her phone close, quietly recording the whispers and conversations she overheard. She wrote down the times Enzo came home late, the moments when Sena and Enzo seemed too close. It wasn't easy, pretending like everything was fine when her heart was breaking. But Nola was determined. She knew she couldn't act on her emotions just yet. She had to be patient, to watch and wait. She knew this was the only way to get the truth. No more lies, no more pretending. This was her only chance to catch them in the act, to make them see how badly they had hurt her. The days turned into weeks, and Nola grew more and more observant. Every move they made, every word they spoke, she watched. Enzo had no idea that his lies were being uncovered, that Nola was seeing through every word he said. He had no idea that the woman he was betraying was gathering the proof she needed to expose him. Every moment she spent watching them, recording their conversations, made her feel more and more isolated. She wanted to scream, to confront them both, but she knew she had to stay calm. The truth would come out, and when it did, Enzo and Sena would regret the day they thought they could deceive her. Nola was playing the long game now, and she wasn't going to let them get away with it. She was gathering all the pieces, waiting for the moment when she could shatter the lies they had built around her. Nola wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a woman who was about to take back everything they had stolen from. And this time, she would be the one in control. The brunch was filled with laughter, food, and cheerful noise. Enzo's family had decided to throw a second celebration. even bigger than the first one. They believed Nola was finally pregnant after 5 years of trying, and everyone wanted to be part of the happiness. The table was covered with pink and blue decorations. People clapped, music played softly, and Enzo sat at the head of the table, smiling proudly. But Nola wasn't smiling like before. She had prepared something special, something that would change everything. When it was time for gift giving, she stood up calmly and handed Enzo a beautifully wrapped box. The wrapping was soft yellow with a white ribbon on top. Everyone clapped as Enzo took it, thinking it was baby clothes or maybe tiny shoes. Even Sina smiled, sitting across the table, sipping juice like nothing was wrong. "Open it," Nola said, her voice sweet and steady. Enzo opened the box slowly. He pulled away the wrapping and lifted the lid. Inside, he froze. It wasn't baby shoes. It wasn't a onesie. It was a DNA test kit. The room went completely silent. Enzo stared at it, confused. Then he gave a small, awkward laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "What's this for?" he joked, though his voice cracked a little. Sina choked on her drink, coughing hard. Her face changed quickly, and her hands trembled slightly. She avoided eye contact with Nola completely. Nola tilted her head and gave a calm, almost innocent smile. "Why not?" she said sweetly. "It'll be fun, just to be sure." Everyone was watching now. Some guests looked confused, others shocked. Enzo's mother shifted in her seat, trying to read the situation. The mood had changed fast, and no one knew what to say. Enzo looked at Nola, trying to smile, but he saw something different in her eyes. She wasn't joking. She knew something, and for the first time, he felt a wave of fear. Sina stayed quiet. Her hands were still shaking as she held her glass. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Nola didn't say anything else. She just picked up her fork, calmly started eating again like nothing had happened. But her message was loud and clear. She knew the truth, and now she had put it on the table for everyone to see. The celebration was no longer about a baby. It was about secrets, lies, and a truth that was about to come out. A few days after the brunch, the results finally came. Nola had been waiting, her heart heavy, her hands cold every time the doorbell rang. This time, it was a small envelope, plain, simple, but inside, it was the truth that would shake her world. She opened it slowly, sitting alone at the kitchen table. Her eyes moved quickly over the words. Then they stopped. Her hands began to shake. The test was clear. The baby Enzo had celebrated, the baby they all thought was hers, was truly Enzo's child, but it wasn't Nola's. She didn't carry it. She didn't give birth to it. And the truth hit her like a slap, because the test also confirmed who the real mother was. It was Sina, her sister, the woman she had welcomed into her home, the one she comforted after a breakup, the one she trusted. Nola dropped the paper. Her whole body felt weak. Her ears rang. Her heart ached in a way she had never felt before. The betrayal wasn't just from her husband. It came from her own blood, her own sister. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She sat there for hours, replaying everything in her mind, every look they shared when they thought she wasn't watching, every late-night whisper, every lie. She remembered Sina wearing her clothes, smiling in her mirror, sitting on her couch like she owned the place, and Enzo holding her, laughing with her, betraying his vows, his promises, his love. And now there was proof, hard proof. No more guessing, no more hoping she was wrong. She walked to their bedroom and placed the results on the bed. Then she sat on the edge, waiting for both of them to return, not with screams, not with anger, but with silence, with truth, with everything laid bare. They walked in hours later, laughing about something, but the laughter died the moment they saw her sitting there. And when their eyes fell on the paper on the bed, they froze. Enzo swallowed hard. Sina looked down. No one spoke, but the silence was louder than any shout. The storm had come, and it wasn't just in the air. It was in the room, in their hearts, in every lie that had been told. Nola stood up, looked at both of them, and simply said, "I know." That was all. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need to ask why, because the test had already answered it. They were guilty, both of them, and now everything would change. Nola didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't beg for an explanation or ask for apologies. She just stood there, looking at the two people who had broken her heart in the deepest way possible. Enzo couldn't meet her eyes. Sina just stared at the floor. The silence was heavy, but Nola stayed calm. That night, Nola didn't sleep. She sat in the living room, thinking about everything, how she gave her love, her time, her trust, and they destroyed it all. But she was done crying. She was done being the fool. So quietly, she got up, went to her room, and started packing. She folded her clothes slowly, took her shoes, her books, her jewelry, everything that was hers. No yelling, no chaos, just quiet strength. She wasn't running away. She was walking away with dignity. But before she walked out, Nola made one last move. She called her lawyer. The house. It was in her name. Enzo always said, "Put it in your name, just in case." Never thinking he'd be the reason she'd need that safe. Their business. It was joint, but Nola owned 70%. Enzo had always trusted her with the paperwork. Now, it would cost him. The next morning, Nola served them both papers. Legal action. She was not only leaving the house, she was taking the house. She was not just leaving the business, she was taking full control. Sina tried to talk, but Nola just raised her hand and said, "No more lies." Enzo followed her to the door, stammering, "We didn't mean for this to happen." But Nola looked him in the eye, calm and powerful, and said, "But it happened, and now I'm happening too." She walked out, head high, heart still broken, but not empty. She left behind the betrayal, but she took her strength, her future, and everything she had built with her own hands. She didn't leave in pieces. She left as a woman reborn. 5 years had passed. Nola had built a new life far away from the pain. She was strong now, peaceful, and finally free from the memories that once broke her. But one morning, her phone rang. It was Enzo. His voice was shaky, desperate. "Please, can you come? He's very sick. We don't know what to do." Nola's heart paused. He didn't have to say the child's name. She knew. The little boy. The child that wasn't hers. But somehow, still touched a soft place in her heart. After a long silence, she said, "I'll come, but not for you, only for the child." When she arrived at the hospital, the air was heavy. Enzo looked tired, older. His eyes were red from crying. Sena sat in a chair nearby, her face pale and empty. The moment she saw Nola, she stood up, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Nola, please. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry. I've been sorry every day." But Nola didn't say anything. She just walked past her, straight into the hospital room. There he was, the boy, lying in the bed, weak, hooked to wires and machines. He looked just like Enzo, but something in his eyes reminded her of herself, innocent, confused, wondering why the people he trusted were hurting. The little boy looked up and said softly, "Are you the aunt who went away?" Nola smiled gently. "Yes, but I'm here now." She sat by his side, held his hand, and stayed until he fell asleep. She didn't speak to Enzo. She didn't speak to Senna. She focused only on the child. Later, outside the room, Enzo broke down in tears. "I miss you. I miss us. I was a fool. Please, can we talk?" Senna joined him, her hands shaking. "I've lived with regret every day, Nola. Please forgive me. You were the only one who ever loved me fully." Nola looked at them both, calm, strong, but distant. She said softly, "Some betrayals don't just end, they grow, like babies. They get bigger, they cry louder, they demand attention, but they don't belong to me. I didn't create that pain, you did." Enzo dropped his head. Sina sobbed. Nola turned and walked away again, not out of anger this time, but peace. She'd given what she could, for the child, but she was no longer theirs to beg, to hold, or to hurt. Her love had limits now. Her heart had grown wiser, and as she stepped into the light outside, she knew healing wasn't just about forgiving. It was about never going back to where the wound began. After walking away from everything that once hurt her, Nola didn't fall. She didn't disappear into sadness. Instead, she rose like never before. She used her pain as fuel and turned it into purpose. Quietly, she began building something beautiful, something strong. She opened a small support center for women, not just any women, but those who had been betrayed by the people they trusted most. Family, the name of the center, House of Nola. It wasn't just a building, it was a safe place, a place full of healing, hugs, truth, and hope. The very first house she gave to her sister in love, now she gave it to the women in pain, for healing. Each room had soft colors, warm chairs, gentle music, and open arms. On the walls, there were short stories of women just like her, women who gave everything and got nothing back, women who cried in silence, women who were told to forgive and forget, but who chose to forgive and grow. More and more women came, more stories were shared, and Nola's little support center grew into a movement. Soon, there were more buildings, in different cities, in different states, and every single one carried the same name, House of Nola, not out of pride, but power. Nola didn't build clinics to show off her name. She built them to remind women that they don't have to break forever, that after betrayal they can still bloom, they can still shine, they can still build something no one can ever take away. Women walked in crying and walked out smiling, not because everything was perfect, but because they now knew they weren't alone. And in every clinic, on every wall, a sentence stood tall. She didn't break, she bloomed. And that was the truth of Nola's story.